Hi, I'm Cheryl Kagan, very proud to be the Senator for Gaithersburg and Rockville. Welcome to this week's very special edition of Kibbitzing with Kagan, brief conversations with people I find fascinating. Today's special guest is Tisha Edwards, Cabinet Secretary for Appointments in the Moore-Miller administration. Madam Secretary, thank you so much for taking time to chat today.
Thank you for having me, Senator.
Absolutely. So we've got so much to cover, and I have interviewed and chatted with, kibitzed with a lot of members of the very talented cabinet, but those folks didn't just land here from Mars. You are responsible for this. So I want to learn so much about the process and make sure that other folks know what a talented group you've recruited. Let's start with your background, though. You started with a social work degree, your bachelor's. You got a master's in social work in Maryland, and then you got a law degree before you shifted into education. So why don't you just talk about your early journey and how that went, and then we'll start your path in government.
I think the first thing to say is that I was born and raised in Mississippi, and to a very young mother who had very high aspirations for me. Going to college was hard for me. I'm a proud two-time dropout of college because it really speaks to how you can have these goals and aspirations, and systems and structures don't always support what you're trying to do. So it took me a couple of times to get it right. I'm a first generation college graduate, and all of that ultimately brought me to Maryland. And I talk about that journey from Mississippi to Maryland because what stuck with me when I decided to pursue a master's in social work and to go to law school was all about education, and that we had to do so much more to make sure, particularly children of color from really challenging backgrounds, had a quality education, K-12, and also those young people who were making the decision to go to college. So that lived experience became kind of the thing that propelled me educationally, and pushed me into trying to figure out how to engage in public education in Baltimore City.
So that's where you spent for more than 10 years. You were
Yep.
working in Baltimore City schools, first with the Baltimore Freedom Academy, and then as chief of staff and the interim CEO at the Baltimore City Public Schools. This may be the dumbest question ever, but why don't you talk about some of the challenges and some of the things you're really proud that you've accomplished?
So the biggest challenge, it's a large school district with a high concentration of poverty. And what that means is a lot of Black and brown children who struggle to be ready for school every single day because they don't have housing. They, have issues of food insecurity, lots of unemployment, not lack of access to transportation. So these are kids to show up every day. It's a lot of work,
Yeah.
and it's a school system that has to meet children where they are, and who not only has the responsibility of educating them to read and write and do arithmetic, but also to help them navigate, solve for some of the other challenges that have nothing to do with school, but everything to do with their success. So
Right.
that's a hard job. However, I worked for an extraordinary superintendent, Dr. Andreas Alonso, who I love, who felt like anything was possible, that the kids were up for the challenge, that the community was willing and able to partner. We just needed to get the system to expand its kind of perspective about education. We need to up the standards, which I think we did really, really well.
I was just going to mention the blueprint. So going forward, the blueprint for Maryland's education, which is a 10-year plan to improve all of Maryland's public schools, regardless of where they're starting or what their specific challenges
Yeah.
are. What do you think is going to be the most important aspect of the blueprint for Baltimore City?
So for us, I think even before the blueprint, Senator Kagan, we had our 21st Century Schools Initiative, which is a huge investment from the state to support Baltimore's children. So the reason I bring that up is because the state had already signaled its support of Baltimore City's children by making this $1 billion investment in facilities.
Mm-hmm.
Then came the blueprint, which was another commitment from the state of Maryland, not only to support Baltimore's children, but all of our children across the state.
Right.
And I think for Baltimore specifically, when you marry that initial investment in better school facilities for young people, and the funding that came with that, with the second extraordinary commitment of funding concentration of poverty, not only for Baltimore City, recognizing this was a statewide issue in rural Maryland,
Mm-hmm.
urban Maryland. I think it created a real opportunity for Baltimore to bring those two huge investments forward in a very specific and specialized way for the kids in the city. And so I think our administration was ready for it, our community was ready for it, and just lots of excitement based on the state's commitment to our children.
So you pivoted from schools to some of the root causes and working on issues around homelessness, food insecurity, as you said, supporting children and families through two different mayors' administrations. Talk about that.
Because what I learned is that our school system needed help, that they were doing I feel like the Baltimore City public school system shows up every day as an entity doing the best it possibly can, but it cannot do this work alone. And so what I learned in education is that we needed to support the community around our schools, and that the school system needed a partner in city government to leverage its unique capabilities to address some of those non-educational issues, if you will.
Right.
And so my career kind of expanded to working in those areas in support, really, of children and families and the school system.
Amazing. So now we have to pivot to the last several years. First, how did you first meet Westmore? In what capacity were you and he connected?
So our connection started around his passion, which was getting kids to and through college, with my passion of education. He was starting his company, Bridge EDU, in Baltimore. He, as you know, is all things education and all things opportunity. Yep. And so we had some mutual friends, and they said, there's this woman who cares about kids like you do, has worked in the school system, who knows how to build big initiatives. Why don't you talk to her? And so that is what brought us together over a decade ago. And ever since then, anything he's asked me to do, I've done. So here we are.
Here we are. So each of the cabinet secretaries that I've chatted with, I've asked about the journey. I think your journey was a lot quicker because others have talked about the interview and then the follow-up interview and then getting the call and all that. Yeah. I assume he just turned to you one day in a meeting and said, I need you, or how did that go?
Well, kind of, but not really. I actually had me interview actually for my job.
Okay.
He felt like it was very important for everyone to go through a process. And it's funny you bring that up, Senator Kagan, because, you meet people and they say, I haven't had an interview in years and everybody knows my work. Why do I need to interview? And the governor, including me, including our chief of staff, said there needed to be a process to ensure alignment.
Yes.
There needed to be a process to be able to communicate how you saw your leadership, the role that aligned with his vision. And so we all went through something. Yes, mine was a little different, but I think it's also important to know that even though I had worked for him 2 times prior, at one point in the conversation, I said to him, Senator Kagan, you know me better than anybody. What are we doing here? And he said, I think it's important to be able to articulate why you want to be in this role. I think you need to go through a process. Every other secretary went through a process.
Yes.
So it was a different process, but a process nonetheless, actually.
Right. Well, before we get to Governor Westmore or even Governor-elect Westmore, let's talk about candidate Westmore. I love bragging about being the first legislator outside of Baltimore City to have endorsed him when
That's right.
1% in the polls in what became a 12-way primary. And but you can just see extraordinary leadership when you meet him. You were campaign chair. Tell me what that role was about and how that led you to start identifying talent and all that. How did you manage that opportunity?
So my official role on the campaign was his chief of staff.
Okay.
At that time, I was working in city government, and he called me into a meeting and said, "Listen, I want to tighten up the team a little bit."
Mm-hmm.
We were a year out, and he had moved from kind of doing these kind of one-off conversations across the state where we really needed to have a real strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Ned Miller was our campaign manager.
Yep.
And he said the two, I think, Ned knows the political side. Tisha knows how to build programs, knows the operations, and knows him.
Yeah.
He said, I want to marry those two strengths. And I think that's what we need to take the campaign to the next level and to really get prepared for the hardest part, which was that, last 9 months,
Right.
the build up, and then it got really, really hard. And he wanted to make sure he had a leadership team in place that could be ready for what we thought was going to be the peak of the campaign. And I took him up on that offer. And it was probably one of the best decisions I've made in my career.
Thank goodness. Thank goodness. We are so lucky.
Thank you.
So you ran the transition team and started identifying talent. So there was originally and persists in being a focus on talent, on diversity, and then there's the volume of appointees. Let's start with the volume. So green bag appointments, traditionally, I think it's 250, 300. I thought we passed the 1,000 mark.
Close to it, somewhere,
okay.
depending on how you count the numbers, somewhere
okay.
between 800 and 900.
Okay.
But absolutely many, many, many more than any previous administration.
I have to take a pause and give a shout out to my colleague, Senator Pam Beidel, who
Yes.
as chair of the Executive Nominations Committee had to interview and vet, along with staff and colleagues, all of the appointees.
He was amazing.
Yeah, she did great. So talk about that volume in a compressed period of time.
Right. So the first thing is there was so much opportunity. We walked into state government. There had been a previous administration that had seen government in a totally different way than our governor-elect.
Yep.
We had a lot of people, Senator Kagan, who wanted to be engaged and be a part of this new administration. And many of those people didn't want to leave their current jobs, but they wanted to raise their hand, be of service, and drive this leave no one behind agenda on behalf of Governor Moore and Lieutenant Governor Miller. So there was opportunity there. We had so many people that wanted to get engaged, and board service really is how you channel that energy and opportunity. And so, I brought together an amazing team. Shout out to the mighty appointments team that we have working for Governor Moore. And we put a process in place. I think the biggest thing is that we were very focused on representativeness, inclusivity, diversity.
Yep.
We wanted the appointments process to look like the state. We did not want it to be overly political. We didn't want it to be just a whole bunch of donors who are important, but they are a part of a broader stakeholder community. And so we wanted anyone who wanted to be a part of this, who wanted to be in service of the state, who were aligned with our governor. We wanted it to open the doors. And so we needed it to create a process that allowed, the grandmother, 60-year-old, never done board service in, Eastern Shore, and some of our most engaged, politically savvy, super sophisticated experts to also engage. And we wanted them to come through the same door.
Yep.
And review their applications for this ultimate goal of representativeness.
So can you just share with the viewers and stuff, how many boards and commissions are we talking about? Because it's a lot.
600.
Yeah. So it's the Board of Cosmetology, it's the Maryland State Arts Council, it's the Maryland State Department of Education. I mean, it's
It's everything. There's
all
something
everything.
for everyone.
Right. And you created a portal, and it was clear. I don't care if you're the governor elect's best friend, you still have to apply and say what you're interested in. And I thought that was super smart and
Thank
showed
you.
the thoughtfulness of and fairness of the procedure. You still must have gotten calls from folks like me, I mean, legislators or donors or community leaders who said, I want you to pick my buddy for this commission. How did you manage that volume and all of those calls and emails?
So, first of all, we did get calls, and that's okay. I think it's great to have advocates for your candidacy, and particularly our senators who are partners. They know they are closer to these communities than I am. Yeah, you know Gaithersburg better than Tisha knows Gaithersburg. So we think that that advocacy and outreach is a good thing. So we didn't shy away from that. The big issue was a process to capture all of that feedback, and that's why that portal
Yeah.
was so important, is so that we didn't lose people, so that I could tie, Tisha Edwards to Cheryl Kagan.
Hmm?
That is helpful information.
Yeah.
It doesn't exclude you if you
Right.
don't have, if Cheryl Kagan doesn't know you, but it's helpful to know
Yeah.
that Cheryl Kagan knows you, right? And so we thought that bringing that process together and having that portal so that there was fairness, there was transparency. And I think the other great thing is there's a rationale for every single appointment. So if you say there's this great person in Gaithersburg, I could say to you,
Or
but guess
Rockville. I
what?
just have to say, or Rockville.
That's right. In Rockville.
Thank you.
I could also come back to you and say, this is a board that has zero representation from Garrett County, and your person in Rockville is amazing.
Right.
But it was important for us to bring Garrett County's voice
Yep.
to the conversation. And
Yep.
so that fairness that you've talked about, that transparency is what the portal allowed.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone who's advocated has been very respectful of that intent. And I'm really appreciative of that.
So let's talk about diversity because it is historic and extraordinary. So almost half the cabinet, the cabinet is basically 50-50 by gender. Women of color, 28%, about half are people of color. And then everyone has their backgrounds that are so diverse, whether it's linguistic or differing abilities or different professional experiences. So how on earth were you able to accomplish that?
So first of all, I just want to thank you for acknowledging and recognizing that in that work that we did. It was really intentional. It was not the governor set the mandate. I want to have the most diverse and most qualified. I want exceptional people. I want excellence and I want diversity. And he was clear that you could have all of those things. You just needed to have the intentionality and the willingness to do it. So thank you for recognizing that. The other thing is that so many people wanted to work for this administration and state.
Yes.
And so it allowed us to really be able to look for the best, the brightest, and the most diverse. So that was really, really important to us. And finally, I think that the governor had been very clear from day one, and I think this is why you support him and I support him, is that this leave no one behind. This was the first kind of manifestation of that call to action. He was very clear that if we were going to do the work in policy, in funding, for leave no one behind, you have to have people who exemplify that, who you could trust that with, and so it was very intentional. And when I think about it, just hear you talk about it, I'm like, man, we did that, right? So,
well, I mean, I said this to you already off camera, but I have been so honored to have recorded these kibitzes with many, many members of the cabinet already. And each is just more impressive than the next. And they are all passionate and experienced and thoughtful and loyal. And they're not ego driven. They want to collaborate and get things done to help Marylanders and to leave no one behind. Just extraordinary.
Yeah, I think that's why diversity is good for everybody.
Yeah.
Right. And I think this is just a real proof point. It's exhibit A of why, when people talk about diversity, we should all kind of lean into that, celebrate that, do the work, the hard work associated with that. Because if you do that, you get a cabinet like the Moore Miller administration cabinet. I think that is just such a wonderful example of what's possible when you say diversity is important. You're not lowering the standards. You're not excluding. You're actually including more people, more, perspective, and you can get to that excellence that you're talking about. So I'm really, really proud of that, and I'm so glad that you've experienced it too.
Absolutely. So another thing that I love is the diversity of backgrounds. So you kept on 2 cabinet secretaries from the Hogan administration, my friend Strickland from the Department of Emergency Management, and Carol Beatty, the Secretary of People with Disabilities. But then you imported Secretary McElwain from California, and you brought former mayor of Salisbury, Jake Day, and just everybody, and brought Kevin Addix from the alcohol industry to be Secretary of Ag. I mean, just their backgrounds are extraordinary. How did you put the word out? You said that a lot of people came to you, but certainly you must have done some outreach and targeting.
So a lot of what we do in the administration is through partnerships, relationships, again, this huge network that our governor has. And for all of those cabinet secretaries, we knew people in the field who had this kind of who would be a multiplier effect for us. So a good example is the Casey Foundation. When we were looking for our Secretary of Human Services, our Secretary of the Department of Juvenile Services, who in Maryland is a leader in that work? The Casey Foundation. So we tapped into that network and we said, listen, we're looking for folks who might be interested in these roles. Can you make sure that they know that we're available for the environment? We tapped into the LCV. We tapped into
League of Conservation Voters.
Thank you. Our partners on the ground who knew this work much better than we did and who had a national view. They provided recommendations. It was just friends, family, stakeholders, partners. The door is open. And what it signaled, Senator Kagan, is that everyone would get a fair shot.
Yes.
The big difference in our administration and other administrations is a lot of time you're bringing your team with you, right? You're a former mayor, you're a former county executive. And so things are kind of locked in because there's a history there. The great thing about Westmore is, again, new to the political environment. So that newness created opportunity for us to be super open to folks. And so that was to our benefit.
There were some people who said, oh, well, he won't know what he's doing because he's a new guy and has never worked in politics. It was like, no, that means that all options are available and he's not.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. What were some must-haves and what were some deal breakers as you thought about people or vetted people?
That is so, that's a great question. You had to have had a track record of doing big things. We needed to know that, and that looked very different in different ways. Like it showed up differently, but as you can tell in our cabinet, these are folks, they've done great work in other places and spaces. It did not have to be government, but a track record of some big successes, challenging some big problems. The other deal breaker,
Secretary Woods. I mean, there's
absolutely. Raphael, right?
Yeah, Lopez, right?
So the other must-have is you had to believe that there was something possible in impossible situations, right? Like that's who Governor Moore is.
Optimism. No, absolutely.
He's a person that if you say it can't be done, he's like, it can. Let's just rethink how we're doing it. And so we needed cabinet secretaries who were realistic about the challenges, because there were and are challenges about all of the work that we're doing.
Sure.
But they could see past the challenge,
Yep.
see the opportunity, be optimistic. And that track record was the validator for us that if they could identify the challenge, they could do the work. So that was like critical to us.
I talk about, it's like a little parable that I tell my staff all the time. Walking along in the forest and you come across a brick wall. And there's some people who say, "Ooh, there's a brick wall." They turn around and go home. And I say, "Oh, there's a brick wall. How can I climb over it, tunnel under it, go around it, and if necessary, blow the damn thing up?"
I just tell you, you are a mind reader. I just had a conversation with a staff person yesterday about Westmore, and I used that same example. If he walked up to a brick wall and you said you have to get on the other side,
yeah,
he's going to find a way.
100%.
That is who he is.
Yep.
And he wanted cabinet members who had that same willingness to find a way through a brick wall. You've said it 100%.
That's hilarious. I use that all the time. It is really rare when the brick wall wins. I'm going to get to the other side. What's a tip for hiring managers? What's a nugget that you've learned that would help other people to hire the right person in whatever their field is?
Taking the time to understand what people care about. Personally, professionally, what is your why? What do you care about? And making sure that their why matches with the opportunity. And I think a lot of times in interviews, there are these questions that just don't allow you to get to know who the person is that's sitting across the table. And usually when you're interviewing, you're already interviewing people who can do the job, their resume, their experience. And a lot of times we spend very precious time with people, I don't think, talking about the right thing. And that's what it taught me in this process with our cabinet secretaries. I was sitting in the room trying to understand, who is this person?
Mm-hmm.
What's important to them? Do we have some common values? Not that you're going to do everything the way I would do it, but do we see this opportunity in a similar way? Is there some alignment? And there were a couple of those interviews, Senator Kagan, where I walked out of the room and I said, I would work for that person. Nice. When I felt that kind of connection, it was like, oh yeah, this is the fit. This is the person, right? And so that's what I think I'm always trying to understand is, what do you want? What do you need? Why are you in this? And sometimes it's personal for people. Sometimes it's professional. Sometimes they've had an experience in their own life, like mine, education, right? That's my why. And so once I can understand that then helps me understand, is it the right person for the job at the moment?
Amazing. I have a few more questions before we get to our fast five. We can't all be sweetness and light here. So I have to ask, there were some of the appointments that were controversial.
Yeah.
So were they surprises? You had different tactics for dealing with them. Some you powered through. Talk about when the brick wall starts to win.
So every decision that we made, we understood that there was some degree of, for lack of a better word, there might be some pushback. And there were going to be challenges. I think that we have a huge track record of success. All of our cabinet secretaries went through in record time, over 900 appointments of folks on boards and commissions. But you were right. There were absolutely a few where the stakeholders were not willing to accept the governor's recommendation. I think that's okay, because you learn from those experiences. There were different reasons why. That's why we have a process where the governor doesn't just get to do this unilaterally. That's why Senate confirmation is important. So we don't see that as a bad thing. That is the process, and we respect that process. But I also will say that we have a governor who is going to push the envelope. And he believed in every single candidate that we brought forward. We did our job to try to advocate for those candidates and get the Senate to agree with us. But it's not a rubber stamp.
Right.
It's a process. And
Right.
so I think if you look at our odds and our the outcomes, it's all
Your batting
good.
average is
All good.
solid.
But I also think that the governor, and neither am I, we don't apologize for every single candidate that we brought forward. We thought that there was a strong reason that those individuals have a lot to add value to our work, but it's not just up to us. And we accept that and we're okay with that.
Right.
But ultimately, we understood that in some of those cases, there was going to be a lot of conversation about those individuals. And this is a part of the work. It happens.
Yep.
We learned from it.
So
he'll do it again.
There you go. All right. So let's move on. Totally different couple of really quick questions. What did you want to be when you grew up? Because you would never have imagined this job. What did you think you wanted to do?
Dance instructor.
Cool. Second, if a young person, what advice would you give to a young person who might be interested in public service?
Do it.
Okay. Love that. Okay. And before we get to our past five, I'm wearing bright pink today. You're in front of a pinkish curtain. We're in the middle of Barbie Mania. Have you seen the movie? Did you play with any Barbies? And what do you think about the whole phenomenon of talking through the role of this doll in women's lives?
So I actually have mixed feelings about it. I am 52. I am admitting that on camera. And Barbie didn't look like me when I was growing up.
Right. Okay.
When I was growing up. And I appreciate the evolution of Barbie. I appreciate the big message about women and confidence and even leadership and the complexities of women that Barbie symbolizes.
Yes.
But I also have to be honest that, when I was a little girl playing with Barbie, there was not a dark-skinned Barbie.
Sure.
So that was not my toy of choice.
Right.
But I get it. And I'm glad that there's so much excited about it. I do appreciate the evolution of Barbie in the lives of young girls and the broader community. I haven't seen the movie yet.
I will be so interested to hear what you think after you see it. If you go see it. I just saw it the other day, and I have to say I was a little dubious, but I loved it. It was
okay. Well, I might put it on my list of things to do, just because if you could get there, I'm sure I can too.
I got there. It was hilarious. It was feminist. It was really
okay. I'm for it.
Secretary Tisha Edwards, time for the fast five. 5 quick questions with 5 quick answers. First, and I have to give props to my interns who came up with this first one, which I love. If you could appoint a fictional character, a cartoon character or fictional character to be a cabinet secretary, which one would you choose and why?
Wow.
I know.
Okay, give me a second here.
Of course.
Character, a fictional character. That's a good one. I have to think. I don't know.
All right. Well, let's go to another one, and maybe before the end, if you
think. Cartoon character.
You had the opportunity to teach any subject to high school students. Well, which would you choose?
Probably African American history.
Nice. Question 3. What is your anthem? A song that inspires you, empowers you, lifts you up.
Oh my gosh. I love all things Beyonce. So anything she, any of her songs do that for me.
Cool. Question 4. You are a high-powered dynamo with personal and professional responsibilities and visible in all of the things. What do you do to relax and get off the grid?
I love water. I love the beach. I love any opportunity that allows me to be in the sunshine. So
with sunscreen on.
Yes. But any time that I can be near water is amazing. Even when it rains, I love water and you know what water does to calm the mind and soothe the soul. So the sound of water, whether it's on a beach, whether it's, you know, hearing raindrops outside, those that's my happy place.
I love that. That's beautiful. Any fictional character yet? Or should we close out with question number 5?
I think I have to say Wonder Woman.
I love that. I was thinking that that's what you would say.
I have to, yeah, I love Wonder Woman, and I love like Wonder Woman from back in the day,
Yeah,
Wonder Woman. So yeah, Wonder Woman.
perfect. All right. And question number 5, the one that I ask all of my guests. Secretary Tisha Edwards, what is your hidden secret superpower? What is a skill or talent you have, something you're really good at that most folks can't do?
I don't know if most folks can do it or not, but I think my commitment to excellence and my deep commitment to people, right? And bringing those two things together. I'm always thinking about people in everything that I do, but I'm also just very committed to the way that we do this work is about excellence in our standards, excellence in our engagement. Just I'm very committed to excellence and
Amazing.
people.
Amazing. Well, Madam Secretary, thank you for all that you have done to launch Governor Moore and Lieutenant Governor Miller on a trajectory of greatness, of excellence, and for all the ways that that will help Marylanders to thrive and to be our best state ever, because this is Maryland's decade, as the governor
It is.
says. So you're awesome.
Thank you, Senator Kagan. You're amazing.
Thank you. It was a treat to chat with you. I look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you. Have
Take
a good
care. Bye.